Welcome to the Book Faire podcast. My name is Anthony, and this week we have an interview with Varian Johnson, author of Twins and The Parker Inheritance, about his newest release, Little Big Man. We also have an update to a previous news story about book bans in South Carolina. Texas has just signed a bill for school vouchers, and some good news coming from the lawsuit against DOGE for dismantling the IMLS. Let's begin first with an interview with Varian Johnson. Hello, Varian Johnson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being on here. To start off the interview, would you like to introduce yourself for the audience, as well as a little bit about the book we're going to be discussing today?
Sure. My name is Varian Johnson. I write books for children and young adults. I've written novels, graphic novels and such, but I've just written my first picture book, or rather my first picture book is coming out soon. It's called Little Big Man, words by me, illustrated by Reggie Brown. And it's about this boy named Elijah who can't wait to fly his brand new kite this upcoming weekend. He's just waiting for his father to get home from work. But daddy comes home and he has bad news. He has to work. There's a new baby in the family, and that means extra work for everyone. So Daddy asks Elijah to be his quote unquote little big man and to help out around the house. Elijah fumbles and stumbles a little bit as he's trying to figure out his best way to pitch in, but he eventually figures out how he can help contribute to all the family chores and such. And then after all the work is done and everyone's worked hard during the day, they get to play in the afternoon with those kites.
Who is Elijah, and what is his scope of the world like? More so, why is it specifically his father that he is wanting to spend so much time with?
Well, I think in this story, Elijah idolizes his father. He loves his father so much. He wants to be like his father. We see places in the text and then the images where he's trying to mimic his father even. And he's a boy who doesn't understand the whole work thing. I think life is different now with the new baby. And it feels like there was more time for play before, at least to him. And so he's kind of trying to readjust. Well, what does that mean now that there's a new baby, now that we have more work to do? But instead of pouting about it, he tries to figure out a way to be productive within the family unit.
There was one specific thing that I did want to ask about, that you mentioned that there's a new baby in the family and that means extra work for everybody. How is Elijah's sister presented as a challenge, and how do you go about writing about those challenges without antagonizing their relationship as siblings?
Sure. I wanted the book to be very positive. I also wanted the book to, exude joy, and even when Elijah messes up, he's not chastised for it. They just have to figure out a new way for him to help and to do things. In the story, Elijah loves his sister, but he does miss the times before when there seemed to be a little bit more time, when they had more time to go play and fly kites and such. So the challenge is making the baby present, but not making the baby, again, the antagonist. I think the chores are the antagonist. And even then, antagonists may not be their antagonist, I think is correct. They're certainly the challenge, the thing he has to overcome, how to figure out how to help. But I really purposely try to kind of separate Elijah from the baby a bit. Also, he's a little young, so I didn't want him, changing diapers, for lack of a better word. I needed a little bit of distance there.
You also mentioned having her present. Is that something that's difficult to do when you're dealing with a character who is not able to speak quite yet?
It's certainly a challenge. It's certainly something I wanted to think about, especially in a book like a picture book that has such limited text. I was thinking through, how do I present this family unit in a way where they're all together, even though there's not room for them to speak or the ability to speak and such. So we do have places in onomatopoeia where the baby talks, but this is also the great thing about a picture book, where the images tell a story as well too. So Reggie was able to weave together this family dynamic and the family together, mama and the baby, even when they didn't always have speaking parts in the story. So that makes it work really, really well.
And you've written a graphic novel before. How is the challenge of working in a picture book with such limited real estate, where you've had graphic novels before. You've had middle grade and young adult novels with so much more word count. How carefully do you consider each word and, in some cases, the onomatopoeia, the sounds that are made?
Oh yeah, it was a challenge. The book probably took 4 years from initial inception to final book, maybe even more, maybe even 5 years. Um, and every word does count in a picture book. I think we like to say, as authors like to say, every word counts no matter what we're writing, but that's not always true for a novel. We just have more room. In picture books, every word counts. And then when we're thinking about the onomatopoeia, I was trying to think, how can I place this in a way that's fun, but that it adds to the story, to the journey as well.
I remember doing a writing workshop when I was in high school with a published poet who the first writing exercise he gave us was a challenge of every word matters. Carefully consider every single word. And then once we put together a draft, he then said, every single word is interchangeable. Take what you wrote and change every single word and maintain the same meaning. Is that something that you looked at, swapping words around, changing sentence structures, especially when different characters are talking?
Oh, for sure. And that's something that's part of my process, whether it's a picture book or a novel. I like to say revising is re-envisioning. And when re-envisioning, it's about moving a word around, but it's also trying to make sure you have the best word or the best person telling that part of the story, the best person telling that sentence, the best attributes that are going on in the setting, in the scene to aid in what's happening in the story. Is it informing? Is it entertaining? Is it moving the plot along? So yeah, I think about that all the time. I also tell myself that when I'm writing a story, that first draft, whether it's picture book or novel or graphic novel, that first draft belongs to me only. I'm telling myself the story. And then after that, I'm revising it for the world. And when I'm revising it for the world, then I am thinking about that word choice a little bit more and reminding myself, oh, I know what I meant when I wrote that, but will the reader know? Can I change this to a stronger, better word that conveys the action, and especially the emotion of what's happening in the scene?
And Varian, you mentioned revisions. You said that this book took 4, maybe 5 years from initial conception to now its final release, which will be about a week ago, given the date of this actually coming out. A lot of times when authors sit down to talk on podcasts, it's always focusing on the creative process, which is, I love the creative process very much. But do you have any insights on what the business side of it is? What is it that led this to being a 4 or 5 year process and going through all these revisions?
A few things. I think picture books, writing is hard. Writing any type of book is hard, but they all have their different kind of challenges, I would say. For picture books, I think many people think a picture book is easy to write, and sure, based on the number of words, it's easy. But again, as we talked before, every word has to count. And then you're really trying to boil down to what is this main story about? What are the 1 or 2 things you really want to get across in this story? Subplots kind of go out the window with it. So it's really boiling down. Is everything really lining up with what you're trying to say in the story with those 1 or 2 story ideas? Also, illustrations take time, and it takes time finding the right illustrator. We knew pretty early on that we wanted to work with Reggie on this book, Reggie Brown, the illustrator. And Reggie's very prolific. He has a very busy schedule, and we knew it was worth waiting a little bit for a schedule to open up for him to work on this book. We thought he would bring just really a dynamic look to the characters. I love his illustrations, and it was certainly worth it, but that adds more time to it. Meanwhile, I'll say we're always revising the book, or as I was revising the book, I was thinking about what is it about. My editors who were coming on board at that point, once it was acquired, were thinking about what is it about. And so much of it changed throughout the course of revision. When I first started the story, it was about a boy trying to make an imaginary time machine, and all that went out the window. And there's this one line of onomatopoeia, maybe 2 lines of onomatopoeia, and my editor said, "Hey, this is something here. Can we take this and weave it throughout the entire story. And it worked really, really well. But it was also a challenge. I won't lie.
That's funny to see how drastically a story can change. And you also mentioned that your first draft is for you, and then revisions after that are for the world. I did want to ask that when you're writing, is there a specific person, group of people, or idea of people that you write for? And does that change depending on the target audience, be it young adult, middle grade, or for this one, for a picture book?
It does change a little bit. I think I start broad and I get narrow when I'm thinking about my audience. Or I guess narrow, broad, narrow. First drafts for me, and then the next drafts are for everyone, anyone in the world who wants to read it. And then it narrows in a little bit about, okay, this is for ages 4 through 8, or from K through third grade, third grade, whatever the case, or for novels, different things. And so I'm thinking about word choice a little bit thin. I'm thinking about what topics or what subjects I'm putting in the book. Actually, that's not true. It's not necessarily what subjects, it's how I'm conveying those subjects in the book. That's what I'm thinking about as I'm thinking about my specific audience. Also, I'm trying to dial down and make the character very specific. I think I love that we can often read books and see ourselves in characters, no matter who the character is. I think that's important. I want that for every book. I think that's the case for Little Big Man. But my job is to be very specific. This is Elijah. This is Mama. This is Daddy. This is Lily. This is this family unit. It's not to be meant to represent all other family units, although you can see yourself and your family unit in the story.
Right. And that's something that definitely comes through, as a lot of times when we're looking at books, we see a need for representation of diverse voices. However, what always comes out of that is universal stories that apply to everybody. How do you feel that we get there, going from inclusivity and bringing in more diverse voices into finding more universal truths for the audience?
Well, I think there's universal truth in so many things that we do. And I think it's incumbent upon us to open our minds to that. But also, there's an educator, Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, who talked about the idea of books being mirrors and windows and sliding glass doors. And even if we don't see ourselves in a book or our family in a book, that book can serve as a window to another family, another type of life, or even a sliding glass door. We can experience someone else's journey through the safety of books and literacy. That being said, I often encourage folks to just, I don't know, take a step back, see how you might react if you were, say, Elijah in this story, or if you were someone else in another story. That's also another way of bringing yourself into a book or seeing yourself in a book.
I always say that books and media that targets young audiences have such an important role in cultivating and teaching empathy. And I think that's something that all audiences can get from that. I always say that I learn more about myself, or I learn something new about myself every book I read. And that's the same thing with Little Big Man. I don't look like the characters. I don't have a family that looks like the characters. However, I can still see parts of my own personality and experiences of wanting to help and not necessarily succeeding in the way that Elijah does. How do you feel that empathy, that need for empathy, do you feel that that is something that just happens naturally as you write?
Oh, no, not at all. I think, well, let me rephrase that. I think in my head, it happens naturally, but really what it is a lot of work that goes into how are we seeing the characters? How can we relate to them? How can we empathize with them? I think I can see myself as Elijah in this story, if I was a reader, and seeing, okay, so I'm trying to figure things out. I can't do it. I can see myself as a parent seeing Elijah saying, okay, how can I help Elijah help out in a way that encourages him and doesn't discourage him? Empathy is all around us, and it is really about crafting that into the story. We want to feel for our characters. We want readers to feel for our characters, to root for them, and to sometimes see themselves in them too, whatever they're going through. And it just really takes work. I don't know if there's a specific thing that I do. I certainly think about the feeling and the mood of it, and like, am I putting something in here where we can empathize? I always want characters to empathize, or readers to empathize, but not feel sorry for a character. And I don't always like a character feeling sorry for themselves. I want them to go through hard things and to come out triumphant, but for us to kind of root for them and empathize with them along the way.
I think that that's definitely something that is very important, especially again for media targeting young audiences, is giving the character agency. Elijah is presented with a thing that he wants. He has obstacles and roadblocks to that. And instead of seeking help from the adults around him, he is taking charge himself to be the little big man and stepping up and filling that role. And a lot of times, children are much smarter and much more capable than we give them credit for. And there's a lot of subtext to any story. And whenever you present a family that has a new child at home with a stay-at-home mother and a father who is working late, there are implications of what that family is currently going through. What is it like depicting struggles in a family from the perspective of a young boy like Elijah? And how does Elijah process these challenges, even if he doesn't necessarily understand or process them?
That's a good question. When I was initially coming up with the idea for the story and working on it, I did see this as, a blue collar family, and they're working and money's tight sometimes. I don't necessarily think that's something that Elijah would recognize. I don't think he can recognize that money is tight, but he can recognize that time is tight and that there's not much time around. And he knows it has to do with there being a new baby, but he doesn't really understand what the new baby means and what it costs and all those things associated with it. He sees that time it takes away from his mother and his father and then from him. So with that, I think he's trying to figure out, okay, how can I create more time? And what can I do to kind of create more time with his family? He's not thinking about money, right? He's not thinking about anything along those lines, but he's thinking about what he can control. And he can't control, okay, if I do these things and help out, maybe I can help with time. Also, there's a part of the book where Elijah, he's woken up the next day, he's going to try again. And part of him trying out again is building something for his father and helping his mother out in small ways. Sometimes, subconsciously, I was probably thinking about this. Sometimes the best thing that a child can do when the parent is super busy is to keep themselves entertained and help out when needed and asked, but not to create another obstacle, another burden for the parent. And I think that's really, really great that Elijah does that. He's doing something for his father. He's pitching in the best way he can. And sometimes pitching in means grabbing a bottle, cleaning up your mess, things along those lines, but not causing more stress for an already tense dynamic.
And again, it's tension that is imperceptible to the main character, maybe on like the conscious level, but subconsciously he's aware that maybe cleaning up after himself is probably the best course of action. Even if he doesn't consciously process that or think about it, he just does it.
Exactly.
And Elijah's dad tells him at the beginning that sometimes you have to work hard, and then after you work hard, you get to play. And that's when we get to Elijah making something for his dad. And so, like, there are plenty of children who live a similar experience to Elijah and his family. And then we see Elijah giving something to his dad. How important is it for you as the writer to show that the child is reciprocating this effort that the parent is putting in as the working, as the breadwinner of the household?
Yeah. When I was working on that story, I always knew I wanted this moment between Elijah and his dad. About how his dad is seeing Elijah in a slightly different way now because of this little small thing. And that changed over the courses of revisions of the draft, but that moment was always going to be there. And I wanted to just have this poignant small moment where he's like, oh, you're doing something for me. It's important for us all to work hard so we can play hard. I think Daddy does work really, really hard for the family. I think Mama works really, really hard. But they should enjoy some downtime and some relaxation time or some fun time as well. So it's really important for me to have that in there and for Elijah to be conscious of that. oh my gosh, you're working so hard. We're all working hard, but you get to play too. That was really, really important for me to have in there.
And it's not just fun time, but fun time with family.
Exactly. Part of it is Daddy says his line where, helping out your family can make you feel like springtime on a summer day or maybe summer on a spring day. Now I'm getting the words mixed up. And I think that's really important. Like sometimes doing stuff collectively as a unit feels good. Even though you're doing it together. And it doesn't seem as hard, as laborious as before.
And the last thing to close out this interview, I ask this question to all guests on the podcast. Varian, how do you see yourself and the work that you do as a writer?
Oh, that's a good question. My job is to tell stories, number one. And within telling those stories, I'm asking questions. I do think or at least I try to avoid the idea of impacting a moral or a theme or a story. You must think this. You shall get this from a book. I don't think that's my job at all. My job is to pose questions and scenarios and for the reader to take their background, the things they're going through, the books they've read, whatever they're happening, and to fuse that with their reading of the book to come up with their own ideas and thoughts and images about what's happening and how it relates to them. And if I'm doing that, then I'm doing a good job. But my job is to, again, ask questions, pose ideas, help to have the next generation of young people to think a little bit more and have that empathy for themselves and certainly for their friends in the world.
Thank you. That was an interview with Varian Johnson. His latest book, Little Big Man, with illustrations by Reggie Brown, is available now. You can find more about Varian and his work at varianjohnson.com. Next, we'll be looking at some notable new releases, but first, if you like the work being done on the Book Faire podcast, there are a number of ways to show your appreciation. You can like, comment, share, follow, or subscribe wherever you are listening now, as it helps the podcast reach new listeners. You can also follow the podcast either on Blue Sky at BookFairPod or on Patreon at patreon.com/thebookfair. There you can find episodes posted early as well as sources to stories reported in the show. Following on Patreon is free. There are no posts hidden behind a paywall. Lastly, the best thing you can do for the show is to simply share it with a friend, a relative, or a young reader in your life. Now, on with the show. Moving on to new releases, starting with Miss Liberty by Erin Moonyeen Haley. Weather-obsessed Savvy Montrose dreams of following in her older sister Levi's footsteps by winning the Miss Liberty pageant and taking on the coveted role as the star of the town, Liberty's long-running Independence Day parade. It's a position that could open doors to future opportunities and could mean that Savvy will never feel overlooked again. This year, the anxious 12-year-old hopes to finally show off her tap skills as part of the pageant's talent portion. But everything goes wrong. The pageant runner refuses to acknowledge her dance abilities. The parade is in danger of being cancelled, and worst of all, to Savvy, Levi uses the traditionally quiet and compliant Miss Liberty role to raise awareness of voting inequality following the closure of Liberty's voting center. In this heartfelt debut, Haley sensitively portrays a character who's struggling to hold on to the comfort of the familiar while contending with the fear regarding an uncertain future. Savvy's personal ambitions collide with her desire to support her sister's efforts, making for engaging, relatable, familial, and internal drama. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next up, El Niño by Pam Muñoz Ryan. Illustrated by Joe Cepeda. 8th grader Kai Sosa contends with grief following his older sister's death in this powerful tale by Newbery honoree Muñoz Ryan. 2 years prior to the book's start, Kai's 16-year-old sister Callie, a record-breaking competitive swimmer, went surfing in the Pacific Ocean and never returned. Named for Calafia, the mythic Amazonian queen who inspired the name of California, Callie was passionate about aquatic mythology, which Kai learns after pursuing her overdue library books. Following Callie's death, Kai joins a swim team, but falls short of the demanding expectations. He's distracted thinking about Callie's disappearance, the legend of Queen Calafia, and the entity's Library of Despair and Sorrow, purportedly hidden in the ocean. When Coach Dominique and assistant coach Jose take the team to practice in the open ocean, Kai embarks on an otherworldly experience that leaves him questioning reality. Delicate, blue-lined digital illustrations by Cepeda amp up the surreal atmosphere and magical realism elements of Kai's journey through loss. An author's note concludes, Spanish language edition publishing simultaneously. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next up, The Gate, the Girl, and the Dragon by Grace Lin. Lin combines ancient and contemporary Chinese lore in this visually stunning tale about a girl, a lion cub, and a worm who must retrieve a lost sacred object to reconnect the mortal and spirit worlds. Jin is a gongxi, a stone lion guardian charged with watching over humans and protecting the sacred sphere, which powers the gate between realms. Bored of his duties, Jin prefers to perfect his athletic abilities instead. But when a rogue kick knocks the sacred sphere through the portal, he gives chase, trapping himself in the human world. Stuck in diminutive lion cub form, Jin allies with mortal tween Lulu, who can hear a mysterious voice, and a mustachioed worm claiming to be a dragon. Together, they must return the sphere to the gate. Unknown to them, however, they're up against a shadowy specter's own agenda. Vibrantly colorful, full-page gauche pieces depict ethereal happenings, and foreshadowing chapter openers feature key objects or places. Skillfully woven adventure injects excitement into the trio's expansive journey, during which they learn lessons on love, duty, growing up, and the meaning of home. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. Next up, Return to Sender by Vera Brosgol. Life has been rough for 4th grader Oliver and his mother since his father died. After a short period spent unhoused, their luck seems to be changing for the better. Oliver's idiosyncratic, recently deceased Aunt Barbara bequeaths the duo an apartment in her will. Now Oliver attends exclusive Whittle Academy, where his mother works as a custodian and student concierge. Surrounded by classmates from wealthy and influential families, Oliver keenly notes differences in their circumstances. When Oliver discovers a wish-granting mail slot in the apartment, he and his new, and only, friend, troublemaker Colette, make increasingly grand wishes, written on slips of paper they push through the opening. Upon realizing how the wishes adversely affect others, Oliver and Colette scramble to undo the damage and shutter the mail slot. But others, including neighbor Eliza, want the wishes to continue at any cost. In this prose debut, author Brosgol employs a whimsical conceit to spin an unforgettable tale. Readers will resonate with sensitive and empathetic Oliver, whose pie-in-the-sky desires and earnest grief-fueled yearnings for his father are achingly heartfelt. This book is recommended for ages 8 to 12. And lastly, Weird, Sad, and Silent by Alison McGhee. Ever since she stood up to her mother's loud, violent boyfriend 2 years ago, Daisy Jackson has gotten good at invisibilizing herself through silence to stay safe from bullying peers. Now a 5th grader, friendless Daisy nicknamed Weird, Sad, and Silent by her classmates, finds comfort in patterns and routines such as rereading her beloved copy of Dear Mr. Hinshaw, memorizing Roman numerals, and writing secret cat-centric haiku as she prepares to tame a feral stray feline she dubs Rumble Paws. But the arrival of new student Austin, whom Daisy perceives as being unapologetically himself, challenges her not only to embrace change, but enact it. As Daisy gains agency, she uncovers secrets about her classmates and learns that having a voice and choosing to use it are very different things. Quote, "There's power in making people afraid of you, in knowing a secret about someone, in telling everyone else the secret, and in not telling everyone else." End quote. Written in compelling, read-aloud-ready vignettes that are as compact as they are impactful, author Alison McGhee delivers a distinctly voiced story of connection and resilience. This book is recommended for ages 9 to 12. Next up, we will conclude the episode with headlines starting with the school voucher bill signed by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. After many years of lobbying and special sessions, the Texas State Senate and House of Representatives have finally passed a version of a school voucher program that will later be implemented. The program will allow families to receive $10,000 per year to help pay for students' private school tuition. Children with disabilities can qualify for as much as $30,000 per year. This funding comes if a family pulls a student from a public school, taking the funding from the public school and giving it directly to the families. Critics of the program point to rural districts where school vouchers will be taking funding away from schools with minimal funding, as voucher programs take directly from the state's Department of Education budget. The bill, as signed by Governor Abbott, is capped at $1 billion for the first year and is estimated to reduce public school funding by $4.5 billion a year by 2030. The projection is contingent on the full budget being used each year, so there is a bit of hope that the $4.5 billion reduction is overstated. However, it is still very worrying. This is one of the largest school voucher programs to be implemented. Time will tell how this will ultimately affect education in the state of Texas. Next, an update to an earlier story covering a vote to ban books statewide in South Carolina. On April 1st, the South Carolina Department of Education was to hold a vote on 10 titles to be banned from all public schools in the state. However, after public comments, the vote was tabled for the meeting and postponed. These books were all up for removal based on Regulation 43-170, which was covered on a previous episode of the Book Faire podcast. If you'd like a recap on that, there are links to sources at patreon.com/thebookfair. And now, those same 10 titles, Collateral by Ellen Hopkins, Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe, Empire of Storms by Sarah J. Maas, Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Hopeless by Colleen Hoover, Identical by Ellen Hopkins, Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas, Living Dead Girl by Elizabeth Scott, Lucky by Alice Sebold, and Tricks by Ellen Hopkins have all been voted to be removed from all public schools in South Carolina. On the bright side, however, the decision was met with vocal opposition. Pro-Truth South Carolina, Midlands Apple, Families Against Book Bans, and Liberation is Lit are some organizations that showed up to the meeting in protest, staging a read-in at the lobby posted on Blue Sky by ACLU of South Carolina at ACLUSC. On Instagram, Families Against Book Bans shared the news by saying, Quote, "We are truly disappointed there was no further discussion following last month's vote to postpone the vote and potentially amend the removal. As always, we will keep fighting. Our work is far from over." End quote. The 10 titles banned this week join other books, including Damsel by Elena K. Arnold, Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover, Normal People by Sally Rooney, The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky, All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, Flamer by Mike Curato, Push by Sapphire, and several books from the Court of Thorns and Roses series by Sarah J. Maas. There are some valid reasons to remove titles from schools. I personally believe that young adult is a misnomer that needs to be redefined. Many books in the young adult category don't actually fit the age-appropriate standard for library curating. However, there are professionals in schools and public libraries with degrees, some masters, in library sciences that are more qualified to make decisions than the state. And lastly, closing on more positive news, a judge issues an injunction in favor of attorneys general in IMLS lawsuit. In March, DOGE limited the duties of the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and 2 separate lawsuits were quickly filed: Rhode Island v. Trump and ALA v. Sonderling. Rhode Island v. Trump was filed from 21 state attorneys general and largely dealt with the wrongful termination of federal employees, and had a motion hearing in April, where the judge expressed frustration over lack of evidence from the defendant, being Trump's administration. The second case had its hearing on May 1st, and Judge Richard J. Leon granted a temporary restraining order against the case, meaning that there is a temporary halt in further dismantling of IMLS. Then, just before recording on May 6th, Judge John J. McConnell issued an injunction and denied a stay from the current administration upholding the previous restraining order. While at this time we are awaiting further court dates in the case before a decision is made, we are seeing that judges are overwhelmingly siding with the plaintiffs, that the Trump administration has no right to unilaterally dismantle the federal agency without approval by Congress. This is only the first of many court cases against the administration and DOGE, and bodes well for these agencies that the president will not be able to cut them on a whim. However, it doesn't stop Congress from doing so, but for now, slows the president and DOGE from cutting further. And this wraps up another episode of the Book Faire podcast. You can follow for free on Blue Sky at Book Faire Pod, or on Patreon at patreon.com/thebookfair, where you can find sources to news stories used throughout the podcast. If you appreciate the work being done here, please consider sharing the podcast with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Thank you so very much for listening, and as always, I'll talk at you next time.